I would like you to meet Boomer the Beaver. You might relate him to our own Smokey Bear, except Boomer has beaver teeth and he's complete with a plastic beaver tail. And since he is a symbol of Canada's national parks, don't be surprised to see him enjoying the parks. Our first stop is Gros Morne National Park in Canada's most easterly province, Newfoundland. A major goal of Canada's national park system is to preserve and protect examples of Canada's various geology, flora, and fauna. Gros Morne lies along Newfoundland's west coast and faces Labrador across the Strait of Belle Isle. Gros Morne is unusual because of its fresh and saltwater fjords and its rock formations that were formed deep within the earth. For the past 5,000 years, people have lived on this land, fishing in the sea and in the rivers, or hunting on the forested slopes. It was to this land of steep-sided fjords and spectacular waterfalls that the Vikings came and built villages 500 years before Columbus discovered America. The Vikings also left records of the first birth by a Scandinavian woman in this new land they called Vineland, meaning grape or wineland, probably because of the wild grapes growing in the area. Today, visitors come to Gros Morne to fish the popular salmon and trout streams, to hike through unspoiled wilderness, and to sail through spectacular fjords. Now, each province has its own fishing regulations. By the way, there's only one person who is exempt from all regulations. Well, you might join other visitors for a sunset campfire program. Unlike American park rangers, who have to be a jack of all trades, the Canadian Park Service hires their personnel to do specific jobs. Park wardens to provide general supervision, information officers, and interpreter personnel whose job is to organize tours and entertainment. Now, many are semi-professional entertainers or college faculty members whose specialty may be geology or botany. A must on your visit to Gros Morne is to sail through the fjords of Western Brook Pond. It requires about a 3-mile hike over a well-maintained trail, but it's well worth the effort. I've seen the spectacular fjords of Norway, and these are equally beautiful. Many thousands of years ago, this land was carved by glacial action. About 10,000 years ago, this fjord was open to the sea, but today it's landlocked. However, it still exhibits all the characteristics of a Norwegian fjord. Majestic cliffs rising 2,000 feet above the deep blue waters. Waterfalls casting their misty veils below. Each national park has its own character, its own story as a living outdoor museum. Eventually, Canada will have at least 48 national parks representing all of the unique environmental areas of Canada. Gros Morne tells the story of coastal mountains cut by prehistoric glaciers and then leaving huge fjords when the glaciers receded. Established in 1936, Cape Breton Highlands in Nova Scotia was the first national park in the Atlantic provinces. The western edge of Cape Breton Highlands, which faces the Gulf of St. Lawrence, features a rugged coastline with cliffs reaching 1,000 feet. It was along these shores that John Cabot first landed in North America in 1497. Cape Breton Highlands is noted for having one of the most scenic roads in Canada, a 65-mile highway called the Cabot Trail. Hairpin turns and steep grades were the words used in the early days to describe this mountain road. As late as the 1930s, tourists were warned not to travel this road if they were inexperienced drivers or timid. And of course, brakes had to be in perfect condition. Today, it's a well-maintained highway with information plaques along the way, so motorists may take their own self-guided tour. In the 1920s, it was common that a motorist would attach a spruce tree to the rear bumper of the car and drag it behind the car to slow it down on the steeper grades. Cape Breton Highlands is also noted for its Atlantic salmon and sea trout. Here, the park personnel have set up a special program of salmon management which attempts to maintain an adequate salmon supply in their rivers. They do this by trapping the salmon that come upstream. They are counted, the ages judged by their size and coloring, and then released. And this is all done with a wooden viewing box with a clear glass face on the bottom, which permits them to see the salmon without having to handle them. Unfortunately, this wilderness is so fragile. A careless cigarette, a campfire that is not properly extinguished, and this is the result. On the other hand, Mother Nature is resilient. Although the scars may last for years, it isn't long before wildflowers begin to carpet the forest floor. As you walk down forested trails, you may get a glimpse of a deer, bobcat, fox, moose, or black bear. Yes, wildlife begins returning to the area, including boomer. I mentioned earlier that the Canadian park system provides a wide variety of accommodations. Here at Cape Breton Highlands, located on a picturesque peninsula, is the deluxe Celtic Lodge with first-class rooms and serving excellent cuisine. This hotel is operated by the provincial government. Here on the East Coast, lobster is one of their most popular dishes. Yes, this is one way you can enjoy the rugged life. The beauty and diversity of Cape Breton's Cabot Trail will linger long in your memory. Just bring good breaks. Our next stop westward is to the province of New Brunswick and Fundy National Park, noted as the Bay of the Giant Tides. This area has long been a fishing center for lobsters and scallops, but in 1948, Fundy, which means deep river in Portuguese, became a national park. This area has long been inhabited, and this covered bridge is evidence of those former inhabitants. There are 24 waterfalls within the park. Most are easily reached by short hikes, and it's such a delight to come around the bend of a trail on a warm day and suddenly feel the cool mist from a beautiful waterfall gently enshrouding you in your path. The pitcher plant is carnivorous, attracting insects to its throat, which contains a mixture of rainwater and enzymes secreted by the plant. Once inside the flower, the insect drowns in the liquid. And peat bogs, which are relics from the Ice Age, are found here in Fundy. Without wooden boardwalks stretching across these bogs, it can be fatal to try walking here. In Fundy, they're trying to reintroduce falcons into the area. The park purchases young falcons from a falcon breeder at the cost of $800 each. The falcons are kept in this hutch, perched on the ledge of a sheer cliff, which can be reached only by climbing ropes. The birds are kept here just long enough to become accustomed to the environment. Then, a tiny radio transmitter, which lasts about a month, is glued to a tail feather of the falcon. This gives the park personnel a chance to follow the falcon once it's released. Eventually, the tail feather with the transmitter is sloughed off. Unfortunately, many of the birds perish for various reasons. All expenses considered, it costs the Park Service about $20,000 for every falcon that survives. But the park administrators feel that it's worth the effort and expense. The waters around Fundy hold the world's record for the greatest tides. Twice daily, the tides vary up to 50 feet. This phenomenon is partly due to the flow of ocean water being squeezed into a long funnel-shaped bay, creating a dramatic variation in the tides. Each day, the lobster boats head home with the incoming tide, and since the tide shifts about 1 hour each day, fishermen, as well as local residents and children who are likely to go out on the tide flats, keep tide charts in their pockets. In this area, you can order a delicious lobster dinner for a very reasonable price. Well, it would be smaller than this 26-pound lobster that was caught off this coast, and it's still not a world's record. Besides the wilderness areas, the park also maintains a variety of popular vacation activities. A 9-hole golf course complete with Bambi. The park also maintains acres of well-groomed lawn for bowling, picnics, just relaxing. Although the weather is not so dependable as in some of the western parks, the park personnel like to think of Fundy as a family park with something to do for all ages. Every summer, the Alma Jubilee is held in the small fishing community of Alma just bordering the park. It's really an excuse for local residents and visitors to get together and have a good time. Activities include canoe and bed races, a parade, queen contest, and plenty of good food. I think you're beginning to understand that the goals of Canada's national parks are not only to conserve the natural wilderness, but also to provide recreation for people. Since people have diverse tastes, many of Canada's national parks provide not only wilderness areas for those who wish to be close to nature, but also more socially oriented facilities such as golf courses, lawn bowling, tennis, playgrounds, and swimming pools. Visitors to this area may see how the locals entertain themselves during the summer, and that is with a bed race. Besides the good times you'll have here in Fundy, I'm sure you'll always remember those fantastic tides and the delicious lobsters and scallops. Now, La Mauricie, located about 2 hours' drive north of Montreal and Quebec City, was established in 1970. It's an area representing a balance of forest and over 150 lakes and ponds. Obviously, the highlight of this park is canoeing, canoe camping, and fishing, which is some of the best in all Canada. And La Mauricie offers such unspoiled beauty and seclusion that President Kennedy and his family often came here on vacation. The Kennedy family cottage can be seen along a remote lakeshore. And La Mauricie was named after this region of Mauricie and after the river of the same name. And La Mauricie is made up of weathered hills, steep cliffs, valleys, lakes, and forests of spruce, fir, maple, and birch. As with so many other Canadian national parks, we find a wide variety of activities, such as clean beaches, boule, which you might expect to find in a French province, children's programs, and in recent years, trail bikes are growing in popularity. A wonderful way to learn more about La Mauricie is to follow along on a free car tour. However, since we are in French-speaking Quebec, all tours and programs are presented in French. But the park personnel are bilingual, and they may take pity on those of us who don't speak French and give us an English summary. La Mauricie and several other national parks have created special trails for those who are challenged, as well as other services. And even the picnic tables have been raised to fit a wheelchair under them. Visitors are discouraged from feeding the wild animals because they become dependent on humans, and when the humans leave, the animals are in trouble. However, this little chipmunk was semi-domesticated, and he had a reliable year-round source of food. Again, I was impressed at the modern information centers. They were more than a place to hand out brochures. Most had a small natural history museum and an auditorium for special programs and slideshows. Because of the popularity of fishing at La Mauricie, a few of the best fishing lakes are restricted as to the number of fishermen. So if you wish to fish one of those lakes, you have to submit your name to a free lottery and be outside this building at 7 a.m.
Numéro 407. OK? OK. Ouais, OK. Je vais vous prendre le billet. Bonne journée. OK. Numéro 403. OK. Permis de séjour? Quel lac vous voulez aller? Et voilà. Merci beaucoup. Okay. Bonjour. Bye. Merci. Bye bye.
Fishing here is so incredible that I saw fishermen catch their limit in as little as a half hour. After that, the fishermen generally continued to fish with barbless hooks and threw back the fish. Here, the popular sport fish are brook and lake trout, pike, bass, and yellow walleye. The canoe camper can go for one night or an entire month, paddling from lake to lake without ever coming back the same way. What a wonderful experience getting away in the wilderness. Incidentally, the dense green forests are inhabited by moose, timber wolves, deer, lynx, red fox, and black bears. But don't worry, most campers come back alive. Also, here is a place where a woman really has a chance to carry her own weight. And by the way, camping is when you sleep outdoors, cook your food over an open fire, wash clothes in a bucket, and do all the things you did in the army, but now you call it fun. A conducted canoe tour is a wonderful way to learn more about the lakes and the history of this area. Besides the Indians who hunted and fished in this bountiful area, lumbermen were the first white men to settle here. They discovered that the lakes offered fantastic fishing. Private fishing clubs started springing up in 1883. Prime ministers and presidents frequented the area. By the time La Mauricie became a national park in 1970, there were 16 private fishing clubs, all of which are now closed. The Amerindians, the Crees, the Algonquins all inhabited this area before the white men arrived. So, in our tour today, some of those Indian traditions are demonstrated. An attractive tent auditorium was the setting for the evening program, which turned out to be a lumberjack fashion show, as one might see 100 years ago. Of course, the program is presented in the French-Canadian dialect. By the way, it's only in the province of Quebec, where French is the first language. Every place else in Canada, English is the primary language.
Parce que maintenant, on porte de moins en moins la laine, puisqu'on travaille l'hiver souvent dans des machines, on va porter plus de coton, on se garde toujours les idées bien au sec aussi. N'empêche que l'homme reste quand même... Évidemment, le travail reste difficile, le travail reste quand même assez harassant, mais la grosse leçon qu'on peut en tirer, c'est qu'au fil des années, au début, l'homme, comme je vous disais, s'adaptait à la nature,
Established in 1914, St. Lawrence Islands National Park in Ontario lies along the U.S. border in the picturesque Thousand Islands area. According to Indian folklore, long ago, heavenly flowers shed their petals along the mighty St. Lawrence River, creating islands that the Indians call the Garden of the Great Spirit. Today, part of this garden has become Canada's national park, consisting of 23 islands totaling 1.5 square miles of land. However, the park's islands stretch for 50 miles through a maze of other islands that dot the St. Lawrence. The best way to see the islands is, of course, by boat. There are comfortable and inexpensive tour boats that take you on a charming cruise through these islands. Jorstad Castle lies along the Canadian-U.S. border. It was built by Commodore Frederick Bourne, president of Singer Sewing Machine. He called it his fishing shack. On the mainland, where the park office is located, are picnic lawns and a popular beach area. Of course, along the St. Lawrence, water sports are the main activities. Now, although the St. Lawrence is a very popular vacation area, its main purpose is to be a major shipping lane between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. Today, it is Canada's most important waterway, with 2/3 of all shipping along the St. Lawrence coming from Canada. Most cargo consists of iron ore, wheat, and other grains destined for European ports. The construction of the St. Lawrence Seaway wasn't started until 1954 and was completed 5 years later. So it wasn't until 1959 that the St. Lawrence was able to accommodate large ocean-going vessels. Today, it's 450 miles of controlled waterway with its 15 locks, lowers ships nearly 700 feet from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. What a wonderful way for you and your family to enjoy the St. Lawrence Islands, and that is by houseboat. You're the captain of your ship. You may travel where you wish, stop when you want, eat and sleep when the urge strikes you, and at the same time, you're enjoying some beautiful island scenery. The Thousand Islands area really has over 1,700 islands, ranging from mere rock outcroppings to islands up to 5 miles long. Because of the 15 locks that increase the general depth of the waterway to accommodate larger ships, yachtsmen are now afforded a much greater area in which to navigate and to enjoy this beautiful waterway. There's good fishing for black bass, pike, coho salmon, lake trout, catfish, and 15 other varieties of fish. The St. Lawrence has long been Canada's lifeline. The French first saw this part of St. Lawrence in 1615. In 1812, when war broke out between America and England, the St. Lawrence was an important shipping lane for guns and ammunition, since Canada was a British colony at that time. Today, the Thousand Islands area, with its many secluded coves and numerous waterways, has become a yachtsman's paradise.
off there? Yep.
Since many of the 23 island parks have public campgrounds, it has been necessary for the park entertainment to go to the visitors rather than the visitors come to the entertainment. So the park personnel have built their own traveling showboat that cruises from island to island.
Oh, God. Hooray. Ow!
Oh, hi, Olive. Who are you hooing about?
Who do you think will win, that?
Me, of course. I'm the only flying mammal. Watch how well I perform.
Slowpoke.
Not for long. I'll use my echolocation.
And for the yacht and water enthusiast, St. Lawrence Islands would have to be at the top of the list. Established in 1930, Riding Mountain National Park is located in the central province of Manitoba. And this was a sign that greeted us. Well, if the highway department doesn't know where this road goes, I sure don't. Actually, question mark signs are seen all through Canada's parks. They represent an information center. Now, the center of activity at Riding Mountain is Clear Lake and the adjacent town of Wasagamine. Canada's national parks often have active towns within their borders. The towns existed before the parks were formed, and the park system lets the towns continue to function as private entities with certain restrictions. Therefore, you're near all the conveniences of home, and yet within a couple of minutes' drive of pristine wilderness. A unique facility that Riding Mountain provides is an area where a summer-long resident may rent a space for his portable cottage or mobile home. Many of the units are kept here year-round. I haven't seen this type of facility in any other national park in Canada or America. Park wardens are responsible for the protection and management of the national parks. Besides protecting the park's environment, a warden must also be a peace officer, supervise public safety, administer first aid, conduct search and rescue operations, fight forest fires, control insect infestation, conduct patrols of the park, and in general be a good public relations person. Riding Mountain Guest Ranch offers the visitor a chance to explore the backcountry. The ranch is dedicated to keeping guests happy and filled with delicious home cooking. Some visitors come here for day trips, while others stay for several days at their comfortable guest ranch. Riding Mountain has a varied landscape of evergreen and hardwood forests, prairies, valleys, rolling hills, lakes, and streams. It's easy to imagine that you're suddenly living 150 years ago. You can almost believe it, since there are no signs of civilization, no roads in sight, no telephone poles, no buildings, just the pristine wilderness reaching to the horizon. And after a day in the saddle, you may wish to return to the town of Wasagamine for some 21st century necessities. Here too, the Park Information Center offers programs for all ages.
We have one of the largest concentrations of wild animals anywhere in North America, and the largest concentration of animals right here in Riding Mountain National Park. Some of them are here in this display right here. And this is one of the animals that is frequently found in Riding Mountain. It feeds on snowshoe hares. It's a lynx. It's a member of the cat family. It's a lot like the bobcat that's further south. It has big feet for running on the snow in the wintertime. One of our really interesting animals. You may see one if you keep your eyes open when you're riding around in the park. Now, over here, we have a black bear. Although the official name is black bear, they come in 3 or 4 different colors. Some are brown like this, and some are really quite blonde, just like you people are. Now, over here, we have a timber wolf. There are 13 packs of timber wolves in the park, and they are able to feed and kill larger animals like white-tailed deer, elk, and moose by acting in cooperation. A timber wolf can weigh from about 70 pounds up to approximately 150 pounds.
At the turn of the century, the bison was almost extinct, but through preservation programs, the bison are growing rapidly in numbers, and today there are several thousand in Canada and more in the U.S. Moose are abundant in Riding Mountain, but be careful, they are unpredictable. An injured raccoon was nursed back to health by one of the wardens. Now the raccoon thinks that the truck belongs to him. Other wildlife includes elk, deer, beaver, black bear, and wolves. In fact, a popular tour for visitors is a wolf howl expedition through the remote areas of this park. On this spot in Riding Mountain, a German prisoner of war camp was set up in 1943 to supply wood fuel to Canadians hard hit by wartime fuel shortages. It had 500 German POWs and 15 buildings. Each prisoner was expected to cut and split a half cord of wood a day. For this, he received 50 cents a day. The money could be spent at the camp commissary for candy, cigarettes, and gum, or they could purchase items from a mail-order catalog. The Canadian guards and prisoners often became good friends. The prisoners had their own band and, on occasion, presented programs for local residents. About the only thing remaining from the camp today is wild baby's breath planted by those prisoners. For the visitor who enjoys miles of horse trails, Riding Mountain is the place to go. Waterton Lakes National Park in Alberta exhibits a classic example of where the prairies abruptly meet the Rocky Mountains without the usual foothills as a transition. Waterton lies right along the Canadian-American border and butts against America's Glacier National Park. It is at this point where we begin to experience the breathtaking grandeur of the Rocky Mountains. In 1932, through the efforts of Rotary International, America's Glacier National Park joined with Waterton to become the first and only international peace park created by 2 national parks. And at the border is an international marker with the United States named on one side and Canada on the other. This is the only place in the world where Canadian and American park guides jointly conduct hikes to the international border. As in most Canadian parks, Waterton features many recreational activities, including an outdoor heated pool which you may prefer to the ice-fed waters of Waterton Lake.
Well, I'd like to welcome you all to our international border, the border that stretches right across the continent between Canada and the United States. And we are commemorating this on our special activity, our hike across the border today. It's the world's longest undefended border. And I think it's really special, especially today we have people from both Canada, the United States, and overseas.
Okay, to commemorate this moment, let's line up on either side of the border. United States on this side, Canadians on this side, and then we'll shake hands, okay?
All right.
Hey, don't bite.
Are we equal? We're not very equal, are we?
Okay.
All right. I think there's someone in the middle. There you go.
Okay.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, shake!
Hi. Good. Nice to meet you.
There you go. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
And during the summer, Waterton hosts a major windsurfing contest. And by the way, it isn't as easy as it looks. It takes a fair amount of balance. Bicycles may be used on designated routes. However, cycling regulations do vary from park to park. You might reserve a horse at the Alpine stables and go horsebacking into the backcountry. There are so many magnificent wilderness areas to enjoy, and all I can do is show you a few of the highlights. Along the way, expect to see plenty of wildlife. As in most of Canada's national parks, we find mountain goats, bighorn sheep, deer, elk, bison, and bears. However, these days, bears shy away from people because of an effort by park personnel to keep visitors away from the bears. In the Waterton Glacier area, there is a very special mountain known as Chief Mountain. For centuries, it has been venerated by the Blackfoot Indians as a place where the powers of the world come together. Many of the Blackfoot Indians are going back to the ways of their ancestors and coming up here to communicate with the spirits. Part of the Blackfoot's worship involves tying bolts of colored cloth to the trees growing on this sacred mountain. Bells, small mirrors, and marbles are placed with the bolts of cloth to attract the spirits. Now, there are 5 colors in the Blackfoot religion. They include red, which is the color of life and the sun, white, the color of water, blue, the color of the sky, yellow, the color of rock, and green, the color of the earth and all living things. As you would expect, there are many beautiful waterfalls throughout this park. Waterton Lake is the deepest in the Canadian Rockies, and informative cruises are conducted throughout the day. Incidentally, Waterton is one of the 4 locations in all Canada that has been declared a biosphere reserve by UNESCO. To date, there are over 200 biosphere reserves in the world, Waterton is one of them. And it's here where we begin to appreciate the majesty of the Canadian Rockies. Look up and see lofty mountains with sculptured glacial valleys, still lakes that mirror mountains and sky, wildlife, alpine meadows, and prairie grasslands all make up Waterton Lakes National Park. In the mountain parks, we'll be visiting Jasper, the largest, Banff, the most popular, and Yoho, one of the smallest. The story in Jasper begins in the early 1800s when a group of Canadian fur traders from Montreal, searching for a path through the Rocky Mountains, came through these valleys and canyons, crossing rivers and lakes, and discovered a rich fur territory. Yes, the valued beaver was in abundance. The explorers traded with the Iroquois Indian trappers. As news spread eastward about the abundance of the beaver, more traders came. Along the way, supplies depots started springing up, and in 1813, Jasper House was built, which was located about 22 miles from the present town of Jasper. From an occasional trapper's cabin that has survived, we get an idea of the harsh life these people had here in the wilderness. Supplies from the east were scarce and expensive, so the frontiersmen had to depend on their own resourcefulness. For example, cracks between the timbers were filled with sod to keep out the cold. It was a lonely life for the fur traders and trappers who came out west, and very few brought wives with them, so it was common that a frontiersman would take an Indian woman for a wife. Today, the attractive town of Jasper, with its 4,000 permanent residents, is a starting point for most excursions. But the town itself has its own attractions, and you'll find everything from Eskimo parkas to works of art by local artists. And choose from several excellent restaurants. And all this surrounded by spectacular mountain peaks. Jasper Park Lodge is a world-class resort hotel with 400 rooms ranging from modern cedar chalets to luxury log cabins, complete with sitting room, patio, and fireplace. In Canada's national parks, you find well-equipped campgrounds, and Jasper's no exception. But also, I want you to see the deluxe accommodations that are found in many of Canada's national parks. Recreation includes swimming pool, boating, tennis, golf, horseback riding, cycling, and fishing. Here in Jasper, the crying bench doesn't get much use. Several dining rooms offer superb cuisine, or you may have your meals delivered to your room by rapid transit. Most parks have well-kept golf courses, and just behind the town of Jasper is Whistler's Mountain, a popular ski area. However, the funicular operates all summer for visitors who are not inclined to hike to the top, but still want to enjoy some spectacular mountain scenery. And Whistler's Mountain got its name from the whistling marmots that live on this mountain. From here, we see the highest mountains in the Canadian Rockies, over 13,000 feet. From the exit terminal, it's only a 15-minute walk to the top of the mountain. As you stand at the summit, you feel insignificant compared to the grandeur of Mother Nature. But at the same time, you also feel a part of this whole wonderful creation. By just driving along the main roads, I saw more wildlife in Jasper than in any other national park. Elk, moose, deer, mountain goats, and an occasional bear. Now, bears are unpredictable. They'll defend themselves, their young, and their territory if they feel threatened. However, bears can also do funny things. At the Jasper golf course that we just saw, a mother bear taught her cubs to turn on the water sprinklers every afternoon so they could enjoy a shower. Things got a little out of hand when they formed the habit of starting at the 9th fairway and turning on every sprinkler from there to the 14th tee. To combat this daily nuisance, the greenskeeper had to follow behind the playful bear family, shutting off the sprinklers. On another occasion, 2 golfers teed off. After the balls had rolled to a stop, 2 bears raced out from the adjoining woods and made off with the golf balls. Consequently, a clause covering, quote, ball stealing by bears, unquote, had to be written into the golf course rules. If you think you're safe in your car, guess again. The owners of this car fed a bear from the car. However, the bear wasn't satisfied. He got the rest of the food all right, but demolished the car in the process. Now, the car owners were fortunate to escape without injury. Unfortunately, the biggest problems for park wardens are not the animals, but visitors feeding popcorn, candy, and marshmallows to the bears, or what park wardens call bear pollution. Because of thoughtless people, some bears become a public nuisance. They then must be trapped and transported to remote wilderness areas many miles away. However, it's not unusual that the bear will find his way back to his favorite feeding place. Eventually, the bear may have to be destroyed, all because of careless visitors. Mountain goats are commonly found along the highways, and they tend to be quite docile. The park personnel don't object to picture taking, but it is against regulations to feed the wild animals. And don't be surprised to find them nudging up to your car. They only want to lick the road salts from your car. And one of the most popular hot springs in the whole park system is here in Jasper. It has long been noted for curing rheumatism and other ailments. Nearby is Malign Lake with a backdrop of majestic snow-capped peaks. To me, it's the most beautiful lake in the entire park system. Hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a shallow sea here, but internal pressures caused the land to rise. Mountains formed, snow fell, and glaciers appeared. That happens when more snow falls in the winter than melts in the summer. Today, we have what is called the Columbia Icefield, located in a region of great mountains reaching 13,000 feet. The Columbia Icefield covers 120 square miles of ice and snow with an estimated ice depth of 2,000 to 3,000 feet. The Athabasca Glacier is but one arm of the Columbia ice field. Its half-mile wide sheet of ice reaches 4 miles down the mountainside and almost to the main highway going through the park. At the foot of the glacier, special snow buses take you on an unforgettable tour of the glacier. By the way, this tour is so popular that you may have to wait a couple of hours to get on a bus, but the wait is well worth the experience of exploring an active glacier. However, the Athabasca Glacier is receding about 100 feet a year, so in about 200 years, this area of the Columbia ice field may disappear. So hurry and get your tickets. A few miles from the glacier, up the main highway, is Jasper's most popular waterfall, the Athabasca, of course. Now, the name Athabasca is a Cree Indian word meaning where the reeds are, for there were numerous reeds growing along the Athabasca River. The Athabasca is the main river that flows through Jasper. This was one of the rivers that the fur traders followed. Consequently, much of the history of this area centers around the Athabasca River. Another popular attraction of Jasper is a whitewater raft trip down the Athabasca River. While the raft company has trips down some hair-raising rapids, most visitors prefer to take their less hazardous tour, which we will follow. The international scale for judging rivers ranges from a calm 1 to an impossible 6. With an experienced licensed guide, you'll have an exciting and safe adventure, enjoying the thrills and beauty of the Athabasca River. All guests are thoroughly briefed on what to do when they're in the rapids. The rafts are made from extremely tough material, having 6 or 7 air chambers, making them virtually unsinkable. The Whitewater Rafting Company supplies all the guests with wetsuits and boots, paddles, life jackets, windproof jackets, and pants, so that your trip will be not only safe, but also enjoyable.
Come on, dig, dig, dig. Oh, you got him. Yes. Oh, great. Atta girl, Donna. Now you know, the harder you paddle, the better the ride. And okay, lots of power. This is where the hole's coming up. Come on, let's go. More power. We're going right over the top of a great big boulder here. Come on, keep paddling. Let's go for it. Okay, here she comes. Come on, paddle hard. Nice. Way to go! Woo-wee. Way to go, team! You held in there. I thought somebody was going like me. Paddle through those guys. Keep it going, you guys. You just go ahead of them. Okay, let's go.
Somewhere along the way, you can expect a water fight. As we look at all these playful tourists, it's hard to believe that only 90 years ago, the first motorist arrived in Jasper. It took 8 days traveling over horse trails, at times using railroad tracks, and in one section, they had to build their own bridge. Today, that distance is driven in 4 hours. Jasper, being the largest of the mountain parks, has the greatest wilderness areas, one of which is called Tonquin, a spectacular and unspoiled wilderness area for backpackers. It takes a couple of days' hike to get into the area, unless you have a helicopter, but the rewards are well worth the effort. There are 600 miles of trails that wind through the mountains of Jasper. Above the tree line at about 6,500 feet, a subarctic climate has stunted the alpine vegetation. In order to control the number of backpackers in the wilderness areas, the Park Service issues a limited number of free permits. And it's about this time of the year when you realize what this wilderness area really needs, and that is a vegetarian mosquito. There was a movement to establish a national park in Western Canada. The movement was supported by the newly completed Trans-Canada Railroad that wanted to encourage tourism to the west so that more people would ride their trains. In the 1880s, the main street of the village of Banff had only a half-dozen buildings. By the turn of the century, Banff was beginning to look like an up-and-coming town. Today, it's a bustling community and the starting point for most activities, including a nostalgic ride by horse and buggy. The modern Via Rail still services the town. Today, a constant stream of motorhomes and trailers descend into Canada's most famous national park, hosting several million visitors each year. Banff Springs Hotel is for those wanting to see the park in luxury. Now, rather than Banff's scenery, its hot springs first attracted the greatest attention. In fact, the park was first called the Hot Springs Reserve. It was discovered in 1883 by 3 men who chanced upon a deep hole in the ground. They made a ladder from a limb tree and climbed down, and there they discovered mineral hot springs. In their quest for fame and fortune by commercializing the hot springs, they unwittingly helped start Canada's national parks. The hot springs became known for curing scores of ailments from gunshot wounds to mercury poisoning. And legal battles over the ownership of the hot springs eventually caused the government to take it over. There were already 2 national parks in existence in the 1880s, Yellowstone and Royal National Park in Australia. Now, it was time for Canada to have its first national park and the 3rd in the world. Standish Peak is the site of Sunshine Village Ski Resort and the longest gondola ride in Canada, 3 miles long. At the top, a plaque marks the Continental Divide. That is to say, the rain that falls on the west side of this plaque will ultimately end up in the Pacific Ocean, while the rain that falls on the east side will end up in the Atlantic. Rock climbing is another popular sport in the mountain parks. I know that in a number of American parks, rock climbing is not permitted because of the possibility of liability. But in Canada, rock climbers have a great degree of freedom. However, I'm not sure why they call it a sport. To me, it looks more like a flirt with disaster. I tried rock climbing only once, and it cured me forever. And although I'm not a rock climbing enthusiast, I realize that some of you may be. It's important to show the many things that you can do in Canada's national parks. If you're an experienced climber, you may wish to plan your own climb. However, it would be wise to check with one of the local climbing clubs for possible hazards. If you're inexperienced, well, there are climbing schools that will give you the necessary basic training and take you on climbs that will match your skills. However, mountain climbers and overnight hikers must register with a park warden before and after each trip. Welcome to Chateau Lake Louise. This was the way it looked in 1894. Today it's undoubtedly the most famous hotel in all Canada, with 375 rooms and a half dozen superb dining rooms. In 1958, Banff and Lake Louise were declared World Heritage Sites by UNESCO. A plaque along Lake Louise commemorates that event. At one time, there was a swimming pool on this site. Now it's a popular outdoor restaurant, while the swimming pool has been moved inside. From the main lobby, we can head in several directions to a number of excellent restaurants. I ate dinner at 2 of the hotel dining rooms, and I can assure you that the food and service were superb. And you may have a table by a window with a view of Lake Louise and a background of snow-capped peaks. With a view like that, I wonder if anyone remembers what they ate. In the afternoon, just before the sun sets, go outside and sit on a bench along the lake and watch the sun's last red rays disappear over Lake Louise. You'll never forget it. And Yoho National Park on the western edge of Banff has this sign that welcomes you. Let no one say, and say it to your shame, that all was beauty until you came. Yoho lies on the western slopes of the Rockies in the province of British Columbia. Yoho is probably most famous for its waterfalls and fossil beds. More than 500 million years ago, almost at the beginning of life itself, strange evolutionary occurrences took place in an ancient sea on this site. Some life forms were successful and remain today. Others evolved into different animals, while still others, freaks of nature, did not survive. Yoho has the most unusual and complete collection of fossil oddities in the world. So valuable are these fossils to scientists that in order to protect them, they've been declared a World Heritage Site. And Yoho is a Cree Indian word meaning wonder. It's a well-chosen name if you consider the beautiful waterfalls seen in the park. Takakau Falls, which means magnificent in Cree, is the highest in Canada, plunging 1,500 feet to the valley below. Lake O'Hara is a resort for those wanting quiet seclusion. Motor vehicles are not permitted here. However, there is a bus that transports guests from the highway to the resort lodge and lakeside cottages. This resort is so popular that rooms are reserved for at least a year in advance. Yes, Yoho is an uncrowded park, and they would like to keep it that way. Mount Revelstoke and Glacier National Parks both lie in British Columbia on the western slopes of the Rockies. Now, Mount Revelstoke is a land of contrasts. On the valley floor is a rainforest of giant cedars and hemlocks, and on the mountain slopes are brilliant bouquets of wildflowers bursting into color during the summer months. Park personnel do more than just hand out brochures. Trail maintenance is also a part of their regular routine. Mount Revelstoke became a national park in 1914, partly because of its mountain scenery and its fantastic fields of wildflowers, some of which you've already seen. And hiking along miles of improved trails is the best way to see Mount Revelstoke. However, this park is mainly for day use, since there are no campgrounds here or accommodations within the park. But they do provide picnic areas, parking, and restrooms. Western red cedars are generally associated with the coastal rainforest of British Columbia, so most people are unaware of a giant cedar forest growing here in Revelstoke, over 300 miles from the ocean. These cedars are about 1,000 years old and grow up to 8 feet in diameter. Canada's Glacier National Park, adjacent to Mount Revelstoke, is one of the most rugged areas in Western Canada and best seen by helicopter. 1 billion years ago, a huge sea covered much of British Columbia. But gradually the land rose and mountains formed. Canada's National Parks Act of 1930 was created to conserve examples of all of Canada's diverse nature, even glaciers. The sharp peaks, avalanche-scarred valleys, and great sheets of perpetual ice and snow combine to make a visit to Glacier an unforgettable mountain experience. However, there can be hazards in the winter. 144 avalanche zones funnel onto the Trans-Canada Highway. During the winter, park personnel, assisted by an Army gun crew, run the largest avalanche control program in the world. As you fly along, you may see scarred avalanche paths on the mountainsides. Pacific Rim National Park is the place to experience the Pacific Ocean's powerful and ever-changing mood. Pacific Rim is a thin strip of land along the southwest coast of Vancouver Island, consisting of long sandy beaches, quiet estuaries, pounding surf, lakes, rainforests, rocky islands, and a never-ending sweep of the Pacific Ocean. As in most other Canadian national parks, Pacific Rim has an attractive information center, each one specially designed to accommodate the unique characteristics of each park. For example, a mural of a life-size whale is pictured on one wall of this center's museum. Interpretive programs include free conducted tours along the water's edge to explore life in the tide pools. 100 years ago, this coastline was important for its life-saving trail, which was a narrow path built parallel to the shoreline. Since currents along this coast are treacherous, many ships have crashed on the offshore rocks. Without that life-saving trail to lead survivors to safety, the survivors of those shipwrecks would have perished. 50-foot Pacific gray whales may be seen offshore. That is, if you happen to be here during the spring migration in March and April. However, playful stellar sea lions are seen all summer along the offshore rocks. And if you get too close, they'll let you know. And take time to explore the beaches and coves, smell the salt air, and watch the waves come shoreward in an infinite array of patterns. Listen carefully to each wave crashing. Feel the way the wind blows across your face. And let your whole being merge with all the forces of nature around you. And before you know it, the day is gone. The sun is setting. But what a wonderful feeling of exhilaration. A feeling that for a brief moment in time, you've merged with some greater power. Canada's national parks are here to be enjoyed. And whether it be a cruise through Gosmorn's fjords, a raft adventure down the Athabasca River, or just relaxing on a beach, here is something for everyone.